And you're asking yourself, what in the world is this Bob Triplett guy doing a presentation on stress management? It is true that I'm not a counselor, I'm not a psychologist, but at my age, I can truthfully say that I have been around the block a time or two, so I should hopefully have picked up a few coping skills along the way. Then you may be asking yourself also, what does a topic like this have to do with being a cutting-edge librarian who needs to know and use the latest, greatest information technology? And that's another good question. This, of all the workshops I've done over the years, this is the first one that's not totally library specific. However, I do believe that there is a close relationship with stress on one hand and productivity and effectiveness on the job in the other hand. And generally speaking, I believe the higher the unresolved stress in our lives, the lower will be, generally speaking, our productivity on the job. I will be the first to admit that I am not an expert on this subject, and I can learn a lot from other people. And we do need to listen to what other people are telling us. It reminds me of the story of the old farmer. I don't know, did anybody else besides myself grow up, spend any time on a farm growing up? Oh, okay, several of you. Okay, well anyway, the story goes of the old farmer who one day was visited by the young new tax appraiser. The young fellow introduces himself and says to the farmer, I need to look around your place a little bit. So the farmer said, okay, but said, just don't go down over the hill over here. The young fellow reached into his pocket and pulled out this card that he showed to the farmer. And he said, you see this card? This is issued by the U.S. government, and it gives me full permission to step foot on any piece of property in this county, no questions asked. Do you understand? The old farmer just shrugged and went off about doing his chores. About 15 minutes later, the farmer hears this terrible hollering and screaming coming down from over the hill. He goes up to the fence to look down over the hill just in time to see the young tax appraiser running as fast as he can with the farmer's old bull gaining on him. And the farmer hollers out to him, show him your card. Now that young fellow was dealing with some stress in his life, but actually not all stress is bad. There is a positive stress that's called eustress, E-U-S-T-R-E-S-S, which is the kind of stress that gets us moving and going. But then, of course, there is the negative stress or distress, which occurs when stress is out of control in our lives. And in this presentation, I'd like to look briefly at stress management as it relates to librarians and also to the workplace in general. But the main focus will be on how we can best manage stress in our own personal lives. I'm mindful of the clock here, so I'm going to, my watch, I'm going to try to keep moving here. But you've got a copy of my bibliography to which I'll be alluding to from time to time, and then you have personal tips, practical tips that I'll discuss very briefly. So let's look first at librarians and stress. I did an extensive literature review in WorldCat, in Lista, in library literature, discovered there are at least a couple of full-length books listed in WorldCat that deal specifically with the issue of stress in libraries. Janet Caputo has authored a book entitled Stress and Burnout in Library Service. It's published by Oryx Press. In this book, she has what is called a job burnout quotient. where you rate your own library work environment and see what potential you might have for stress and burnout. I recommend this if you care to try that. She identifies a number of stressors, including budget cuts, heavy workloads, technology-related problems, the overload of clerical duties, poor management, supervision, and others. Then, in her 2007 book entitled Managing Stress and Conflict in Libraries, Sheila Pantry discusses several stressors such as problem patrons, harassment, bullying, aggression, and even violence in libraries. This book was published in the UK, so it has a British and a public library orientation to it. Then there have been a number of articles written and published on issues such as librarian burnout, techno-stress, etc. According to a survey reported in an article in 2008 in the Library Journal, librarians were asked, what is the biggest on-the-job challenge? The top three in this order were, number one, keeping up with technological change, budgetary constraints, and refining librarians' role and image. And Kevin Harwell, in his article, Burnout Strategies for Librarians, speaks positively about the flexible work scheduling in his library. Among his personal coping strategies are involvement in family, community organizations, church, and other connections. By the way, Cephalin sponsored a couple of one-day workshops each of the last 2 summers on the topic of stress management with Judy Bailey, the instructor. Did any of you possibly go to any of those sessions? I went to hers a couple summers ago. It was really excellent. And then I understand Cephalin is sponsoring a series of 4 one-hour webinars entitled Stressed Out. It starts actually April 15th, Tax Day. Maybe some correlation there, Tax Day and stress. So anyway, it's good to see that there's recognition on the part of Cephalin and area library administrators that stress management is a very important topic to address. Speaking of work-related stress, reminds me of the story, which you may have heard of the young fella who was just mercilessly chewed out by his boss one day, and he goes home just beaten down, and of course, you guessed it, he took it out on his wife, who then jumped on to the daughter. The daughter couldn't hold it any longer, so she took it out on her brother. The brother goes outside and proceeds to kick the dog. The poor dog takes off running down the street several blocks to where the boss lives and proceeded to take a bite out of the boss's leg. So I guess what goes around comes around. According to Virginia Salmon, writing in Tennessee libraries, American companies spend somewhere between $200 and $300 billion or more each year for job stress and related problems, such as absenteeism, turnover, accidents, and lost work days. Salmon also offers these tips. Seek out positive people. Do the unpleasant tasks early in the day and get them over with. Always take a lunch break away from your desk or your office. I wonder how many of us do that. Conflict resolution is another important related topic, and I can only touch on it very briefly. It really needs to be a separate presentation. But Whiteman, in his book, says, don't go into a confrontation with guns blazing, saying, you are so inconsiderate, incompetent, and arrogant. Instead of using you are, or you always